For the ones who know me and know my channel, you've seen me playing around this computer forever. I've assembled it on camera. That was my very first custom water cooling system. I upgraded it. By the way, watch all those videos, and then I shipped it by the sea from Turkey to Lebanon. And I did my very best to protect it as much as I could. I put even some, Kleenexes just in case it would leak, even though I flushed it, but I knew, in a rush that I was, nothing that I would do would prevent it from having more water in there. And I tried everything I could, but of course nothing would protect me from indelicate movers who really don't care. Whenever you put a sticker that shows upward or anything, just throw it around, bang it, and then the sea comes in and then just bangs the boat around for weeks at a time. And yeah, so that's the result. And so I'm gonna try to fix it with you guys on camera, and not only to fix it, but to upgrade it as well, because it's still a Z270 chipset. I mean, it's my favorite motherboard ever, the Maximus 9 Extreme Edition. But yeah, I mean, we have to get it to the Z370 chipset and the 8th and potentially the 9th Intel generation processors. And on top of that, I'm not only going to upgrade the motherboard and the CPU, I'm also going to put in a second video card, another 1080 water cooled. So yeah, lots of things to do, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. Roll that intro. Before you jump in, make sure you have everything you need with you, which means, of course, distilled water, some recipients for water, again, water towels, because it gets really messy, and your screwdrivers. On top of that, we're gonna need a plug, a short plug for our PSU cables, and all the components that we are going to put in. Another thing is make sure you have enough time around this operation, because that's not something you can stop in the middle. Make sure you have 3 or 4 hours, and do not hesitate to watch this video in its entirety before you throw yourself in this, because there's a lot to absorb, and I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do it myself, so I'm just gonna try to be super professional and seem super professional and secure in what I'm doing, and you'll just buy it. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do here is flush our existing loop. And to do so, we are going to install an evacuation tubing to the draining valve. Next, we are going to put our short plug on our ATX 24 outlet. And of course, make sure that all the other power supply cables are unplugged from the video card and the CPU motherboard. Alright, so now we are going to plug in the power supply unit, making sure that its switch is on the off position, and delicately open the draining valve. Here, simply make sure that you have a recipient big enough to contain all the fluids contained in our loop. But other than this, let's just go ahead and put on our power supply unit. And almost immediately, you're gonna see all the fluids getting out of the tube, but you're gonna have to put on your PSU on and off a few times to give that extra current, this extra flow, and make sure that all the impurities are getting out, or at least most of them. So what I usually do is add a little bit more water to the reservoir, and that usually helps out to scrub those impurities out of the way. Alright, so once that is done, I am going to remove all the tubing in my build one by one. Make sure to do this slow and not to press too much onto the compression fitting. You do not want to tear the tube or break one of the isolation ring, one of the O-rings in the process. Do not forget to put plugs on our water blocks, both GPU and CPU. Alright, time for some cleaning. First, I am going to take away my reservoir and turn my attention to the tubing we have taken away earlier, and you can tell they are very dirty. You can barely see through them. They have this greenish bluish hue, and they should be looking more like this, even though this one is not completely clean either. So what I'm gonna do is take a barbecue stick. This is a homemade solution, a little bit of paper towel which I have soaked in water and soap, and push it through the tubing, and you can see that right away all the residual water coolant is being cleaned by our paper towel. So I'm going to keep pushing, and when I reach one extremity, well, I'm going to use my stick to push it through the other extremity. I'm going to do this a couple of times, so I make sure that most of the residual coolant is soaked by our paper towel. Of course, there are chemical solutions you can buy already on the market, but this is a quick and easy, and most importantly cheap way to get there. Once I'm all done, I'm going to leave all of those tubes in a mix of warm water and bleach for about 24 hours, and that should be able to take most of the greenish hue out of our tubes. And I'm gonna add a little bit more of bleach right here, and try not to touch it if you do not have gloves, because this is quite corrosive as it stands. Alright, so back to our motherboard. First thing we're going to do is to remove all the SATA connectors, front panel connectors, fan connectors, and what have you. This shouldn't take you too long, and we can afterward remove our 1080, our water-cooled 1080 video card out of the way. Nothing very difficult with it. Just keep in mind that there's still some water in the water block. So yeah, I'm gonna take it off camera to give it a deep clean and a rinse. Now, nothing prevents us from removing the 8 screws which used to secure our Maximus 9 Extreme to its case. And ever gently we are going to remove a motherboard with the monoblock still in place. And look at that. Now that's a beautiful motherboard. But see ya. Alright, so now I'm gonna give it a quick clean. I have a Swiffer, and as you can tell, it could be time consuming. So my best advice in this case is to get your home vacuum cleaner, put it on maximum suction, and let it do the hard job for us. Now, mind you, it's also very useful to get into those dark corners. So yeah, and since we're at it, I am also going to vacuum clean the top and bottom filter, and I just want to underline, look on how efficient this thing is. Alright, so that's not the final clean, but definitely gets us where we want to be. Next step is to remove the old power supply unit, this 750V Cooler Master, which did its time, but it's just not going to be enough for our dual 1080s. Well, yes, it is, but I just don't like it that much, so I'm just gonna go and put something a little bit more efficient, and something which will give me the ability to monitor voltage or wattage pull in and pull out of my upgraded system. And so here comes my HX1000i from Corsair. And the only thing we have to watch out for is to make sure that its exhaust fan does face the back end of our case. For the rest, we simply have to secure it into position with the help of its 4 provided screws. Just remember not to over tighten them. Finger tight is plenty enough. Alright, place to something a little bit more exciting. Let's put in our Maximus X Formula Edition, my very favorite motherboard, into our now almost pristinely clean Corsair case. And I know what you're thinking. I am going to finish securing it with these 8 provided screws. Nay, may I say. Why would you ask? Simply because I do not have a CPU protector right now, so I'm too afraid that one of the screws would just fall and immediately damage it. And therefore, without any further ado, we are going ahead with the CPU installation, the i7 8700K, onto its matching 1151 CPU socket. And after making sure that the processor is in its right orientation, I'm going to put it in place and secure it into place thanks to the socket levier. Easy peasy all the way, whatever that means. Alright, next step, we're going to use the 8 provided screws to secure our ATX motherboard in place. Nothing very difficult so far. But things might get a little bit trickier. The next step is to install our M.2 solid-state drive in place, and so we are going to remove our chipset heat shield, removing the 3 screws marked on your screen. Make sure not to lose those because we don't have replacement for those, and that will give way to the M.2 solid-state drive connector, which can accommodate up to 11 cm M.2 solid-state drive sticks. In our case, we have 8 cm long, and as shown on your screen, make sure that the solid-state drive sticks slides in right into its connector, and only after will we secure it with its 1mm screw. Alright, time to put back the heat shield and close it back with the 3 screws, which of course we did not misplace. And because this motherboard can support a second M.2 solid-state drive right here, we are going to install it, and to do so we're gonna need a vertical mount. So it comes like this and can support up to 8 cm long M.2 solid-state drive, which is absolutely perfect. But before doing anything else, we are going to secure the mount with its 2 1mm screws, and finally, as carefully as we did with the first M.2 solid-state drive, we are going to slide it right into its connector and secure it in place thanks to the little plastic lock mechanism that Asus has so carefully, thoughtfully put there for our usage. But I know you might not have had the clearest of view, so here an angled camera for you. Like it? Staying in the memory, we are going to install our RAM, and as in any Z370 powered motherboard, the Maximus X Formula edition can support up to 64GB of DDR4 RAM overclockable up to 4133 MHz, but in our case we are only going to put 2 16GB of DDR4 RAM sticks, which can only be overclockable up to 3 GHz, and make sure to place them in the very same sockets that I've used on our screen, the light gray ones, and that's because I still want the dual channel configuration to be activated even though we do not have 4 memory sticks. Installing them is rather easy. Simply make sure to slide them gently into the RAM socket and to lock them into place by first pressing it here and there. You should hear a little click signaling that the lock mechanism works, and we're gonna repeat this with our second RAM stick. Alright, so all done with the classical part of our build. Now comes the water cooling stuff. So without any further ado, let's jump right onto the CPU. And yes, we are going to install the CPU water block on both sides of the motherboard. First, we are going to install the base, the support of our water block on the back of our motherboard, and we will secure it into place using 4 long screw razors. So with one hand I will put in place the water block support, and with the other I'm gonna screw in the first long screw razor. Nothing very complex, and I'm gonna repeat the same operation for the 3 remaining screw razors. Remember that there is no need to over tighten them, finger tight is plenty. Time to put some thermopaste on our processor, and of course there are different philosophies on how much you should put there. I just like to put a little bit more, but it is really up to you. Now, once that is done, we're simply going to slide in our water block in place and secure it with the different springs and bolts provided with our water block. Note that this is the very same water block that I had used for my i7 6700K, yes, my Skylake build. And yes, because they are using the very same LG1151 CPU format, they are compatible. Front panel connectors, yes, exciting stuff. So here's our bridge, our front panel bridge, and we are going to connect all the front panel connectors onto it. The only thing you need to respect here is the polarization, the plus and the minus, which is marked by a small triangle on the back of our plug, and it has to match either the plus sign or the name of the button you want to connect, either power or reset in our case. You see, I'm doing it again. The triangle matches the power button. For the hard disk drive, it's even easier because there is a plus sign and the triangle has to match it. I'm gonna repeat it one more time for the power LED plus, on PLED plus and PLED minus. There you go. Alright. Let's take our fully populated bridge and connect it directly onto the motherboard. Just make sure it is well orientated, or you are running the risk of bending a pin and damaging your motherboard. Next come our audio front panel connector, our front panel USB 3.0 connector, our water pump connector, our upper radiator fan connectors, our lower radiator fan connector, our SATA cables, our PSU to USB 2.0 connectors. This will allow us to read the in and out wattage of our system. And finally, our thermal sensor for a thermal readout. Alright, so let's move to the video card. So the very first one we're going to install, the GPU 1 will be on the first 16 slot, the closest one to the processor, and the 1080 Strix will be on the second 16 slot. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the Founders Edition. There's nothing much to it. This is a one which was previously in our build, and I'm simply going to slide it right in. I'm going to lock it in with a thumb screw. The second one, same operation, will slide right in the 16 slot, and just make sure that you hear the click, which signals that the locking mechanism worked and that everything is in place. Of course, if you are interested of watching me installing the water block on my 1080 Strix, please click on the right upper corner of your screen. And most importantly, let's not forget this slot open, so let's put back the shield and secure it with a thumb screw. Alright, time to move on. So I have finished cleaning and drying my reservoir, so I'm going to put it right back into place, and we are going to repopulate our loop starting from the reservoir outtake to the water pump intake. I'm going to give you a better look at it. There you go. And from the water pump outtake to the lower radiator intake. So nothing very complicated so far, simply make sure to handle the tube with care and to tighten, but not over tighten, the compression fittings onto the intake and outtake shoulders of our pumps and radiator. Here I'm going to give you a closer look of what I've done, and let's move on with our loop. The next step for us is to connect our lower radiator outtake to the intake of our second video card. Here I started by putting on the barb, and I am going to connect it to the tube and finally secure it with a compression ring right here. It's really important to have a tight fit here because this is where the leak will happen if leak must happen. So make sure that the compression ring is well tightened to the barb. Next I am going to put a couple of plugs on this video card, one right on top on the opposite of the tube we just installed, and one right here. Again, make sure that they are well tightened to the water block. Alright, all done with this. Of course, in my series, why do simple when you can do complicated? I give you the bridge. This ridiculous thing is made of 590 degrees elbow, one male to male rotative adapter, and two 5mm extensions. And of course I could have made this much more simpler, but that wouldn't be me. I wanted something outrageous and which would stand out. So I guess we'll see what's the result. Thankfully, its installation is rather simple. Simply tighten the two elbows on the opposite ends of our two video cards and we're done. One thing I love about the bridge, not only does it look absolutely crazy, but it's extremely flexible because there are so many elbows around, so no matter what is your angle of attack, it should work. And as we did with the previous video card, we are going to put two plugs on the opposite end of our video card in and outputs. Next step, we are going to install the tube between the Founders Edition 1080 and the output of our upper radiator. Pretty straightforward, so let's move on to the upper radiator intake and the outtake of our VRM water block. Now, we are going to need a rotative 90-degree elbow adapter so that we can keep a gentle angle to it. And if you need to take a break, well, tough luck, because it's about to get a little bit more complex. The connection between our VRM and CPU water block is an hybrid between tubing and adapters. So let's take a closer look to it. It is made of one 90-degree elbow, one rotative 90-degree elbow, and a very short tube with two compression fittings on each end, which should be around 12mm long. And the reason why we have a tube there instead of all metallic parts is because we need some flexibility to adjust the connection between our VRM and the CPU. You will feel it right away. It's not as straightforward as it looks, and you need a little bit of wiggle room to achieve a tight and leak-free connection between both of our components. Next step, we are going to connect our CPU back to our reservoir, but before doing so, we have to construct the evacuation valve, which will allow us to better flush our system in the future. I did not like what we had on the current system, so I'm adding a second flush valve. It is made of two male-to-male rotative adapter, a 20mm extension, one rotative adapter, a plug, the valve itself, and all connected by a three-way adapter. Let's note that you do not need to absolutely follow my design. You can go ahead and do whatever combination pleases your build and suits your taste. So yeah, let's move on. Time to connect our valve to our reservoir. Once that is done, we will be able to connect the valve itself to the CPU water block outtake. And yes, this indeed completes our loop. Back on our PSU, we are going to connect all the different cables which will power the different components of our magnificent build, starting with a couple of PCIe Expresses to power our video cards and the CPU cable to give that extra juice to our amazing processor. Next comes the Molex and SATA cables, and finally our ATX 24 pin to power our motherboard. Alright, so let's do some connecting. First, the water pump with its Molex power cable. Then the front fans, again with a Molex plug. Then comes the SATA power for the hard disks. And finally a Molex plug to power the 4 fans of our lower radiator. Alright, so before connecting the main cables to the motherboard and video cards, I'm gonna try to do some basic cable management. But here I am pulling the ATX 24 through this hole in the metallic frame. I'm gonna do the very same thing with the CPU, and I'm going to plug it to the CPU electrical power extender that was pre-installed when I assembled this build. Next step, we are going to transfer on the front side of our motherboard the remaining plugs we have, meaning the ATX 24 plug for our motherboard and both of our PCIe Expresses plugs for our video cards. And here I am going to put on our ATX 24 plug, the short plug which will allow us to start the power supply unit without having to power the motherboard. Making sure that the switch is on the off position, I am going to power our PSU. Finally, the big moment. We are going to fill our loop with, well, water. And before we do so, we have to make sure that it is leak-free. We're gonna put a bunch of high-absorbing paper towel all over our computer to protect all the expensive components in case there is an obvious leak. And we are going to fill in our reservoir to about 80% of its overall capacity. Keep in mind that in order to do so, you're gonna have to fill in your reservoir a couple of times, as the loop will partially fill itself under gravity. So yeah, it's gonna take at least 2 or 3 refills until you get that 80% mark on your reservoir and it stays whole. Once you get there, we're gonna put our power supply unit on for a couple of seconds, and right away you will see that the water is sucked in the loop. And we are going to keep on putting more water into our loop. I did add a little bit of blue colorant to allow us to spot any obvious leak, but this is a moment of truth, and what we're going to do now is a famous 24-hour test. So we will be back tomorrow, hoping that nothing has spilled over or leaked. 24 hours later. Nothing like a watertight build to welcome you to start it, well, whatever. So as you can tell, there is not a single drop and my system is 100% leak free. Now I'm gonna put as much blue coolant as I wish. I decided to stay with a dark deep blue that I had originally done with a build of my Obsidian 900D and its previous upgrade, so no surprise there. Next, we are going to power all of our components around our build, so meaning the motherboard, both of our video cards and the CPU plug on the top of our motherboard.